Okay, well, welcome back to part 2 of a 3-part series for week 4, the Military Revolution. We want to take a look, or I would like to take a look at traditional military versus modern military. A little bit to kind of compare what elements are in each one, just like we did traditional history with modern history. And then we'll go into the specifics of what elements, what traits are really a part of the modern military revolution. So without further ado, let's jump into part 2. All right, we finished last lecture with the idea that now that the armies and the kings are raising up money and they're doing their thing and they're trying to get to the top of the mountain, they're trying to be the top dog, and their armies and the navies are growing and growing and growing, they still have the question, the new situation of, well, who's going to be the top dog? Who's going to have the strongest army and navies? Who's going to have the most territory? Who's going to have the most wealth? Because that is the thing that drives people, that drives kings and queens and people of all social classes. So that's what we talked about. Now, when I talk about military revolutions, I'm not talking about actual battles. I'm not talking about like the American Revolution and the French Revolution. We're not talking about that when we say revolution. What I mean by revolution is explosion, massive radical change, shifts that advance how we do military activities, how we think strategically, militarily speaking. And so that's what we're looking at, not specific battles, but how we do military. How do we fight? How do we protect? Traditionally speaking, if you're going to ask the question, what components, what traits, what elements sort of fit under traditional military, think about, pictures like these. You have people are on horseback, they're on animals, whether it be elephants or camels. There's swords, there's arrows, there's spears, things of that sort. You might get other kinds of carriers. You might get some older types of ships like the Vikings and things like that. Or chariots. Chariots were a huge fear. If an army had a massive number of chariots, the opposing army, if they hadn't any, would just melt out of fear. Sennacherib, when he went up against Jerusalem and Israel way back in the day, he was said to have thousands and thousands of chariots, and Israel just melted out of fear. So these are some of the things, some of the means of transportation. Other parts of traditional military sort of traits would be castles or fortresses, big, tall walls, huge buttresses, people, being able to shoot down or throw pitch and tar over the edge, ladders coming up and landing against the wall and climbing up and other people throwing them off. Anybody who has seen Lord of the Rings or any of those series would understand this kind of military strategy and how they would protect themselves behind these huge walls. In the 1500s, we had the development of gunpowder. It made its way into Europe right around the late 1500s, 1600s with the development of guns. This was one kind of a musket back in the day in the 1600s. It was a single fire musket. You fired it, and then you had to step back and load the entire thing all over in, sort of like a cannon. Think of it kind of like a small cannon. And then you'd come back up and you'd be ready to fire. Obviously, there's limitations to this, particularly if you have somebody with a machine gun that doesn't have to reload. It won't come up for a little while, but that's to kind of give you an idea of how we today look at the musket as an archaic sort of weapon now. So very traditional military. Again, kind of an overview. If you were to take this screenshot and print it for yourself, that would make great notes if you had a test or you wanted to have them side by side. Traditional military, spears, bows and arrows, swords and maces, chariots and war animals, castles, fortresses, and ships with fighting men on them. Modern, however, we have some shifts, and I want to talk about these. There's three main categories: artillery, engineering, and then tactics and training. And we're going to go underneath all of those. You can come back to this, or again, print this and make it part of your study sheets. First is artillery. As you can see in the picture, the invention, the creation, the manufacturing of cannons was huge. During 1600s and into the 1700s, we had major ships. Remember, one of the things that they needed, protection at sea. How do I protect my ships that are taking cargo back and forth? Well, with warships and putting these massive cannons into these massive ships that could carry all that weight from all that metal. Was a big deal, and it was a big advantage. This is one picture of a sketch of a warship. This thing had 60 cannons, 30 on each side that it could fire from. Now think about what that might entail. You not only need to be able to manufacture the metal. Science would do that. Science academies, Royal Academies, learning about metallurgy might be able to help bring that about, and they did. But just simply being able to manufacture these things and then to build a ship strong enough, heavy enough, big enough to hold all that weight, all the cannonballs, all of the gunpowder necessary to arm this, and then take it out to sea with all of the crew. You need somebody that can operate those cannons. So you need 60 very skilled men who can aim, fire, load, troubleshoot these cannons. That was a new skill set. We needed a new kind of laborer. One that wasn't just a nobody who carries a bucket of water, but someone who knows something about artillery and how to aim it and projection and things like that. So that was a big one. Engineering's another sort of overarching type of deal. This is, my French is horrible, but I believe it's Alsace, France, 1678. It's right near the border of Germany and France. The RHIV that's there, that's the Rhine River. This is a fortress. This isn't a fancy little star-looking kind of thing. But this is a fortress. And look at all the angles, all of the triangles, the points, and the intricacies of this. The engineering of this is that no matter where an assault comes from, there are multiple angles from inside this thing that can attack. It's not a flat wall and you're assaulting it straight forward, and this is the only direction you have. It is it's like a little triangle and then another little triangle. And so if I try to attack this wall, these people over here can attack me. These people can attack me. The other thing about this is if you look really closely at it, down towards the edges, the walls look thick. That wall is not straight up and down anymore. The wall is now curved. Now, why would they put a curve on the main wall coming into the fortress? Can you think of why they might do that? No? Someone must have thought about it. If I'm firing a cannon, I got artillery now. Woo-hoo. I'm firing a cannon, it's a ball, and I'm firing it straight at a flat wall. That has absolute impact. I can hit that wall smack on. But if the wall is angled, then the cannonball comes and at least part of that power, part of that kinetic energy is going to hit and deflect, sort of like ricochet with a bullet. It's going to hit and ricochet off. It will not damage the wall as much. So engineering and just design of how they designed their fortresses changed a lot. You get past that outer wall, guess what? You got now another inner wall also with those same little triangle angles again. So a very, very interesting way of defending that. So lots of engineering changes. And then the other one that I want to talk about is techniques, how to fight. the idea of, you just gather a bunch of people together and you all go off to war, that stops. That stops because now there are professionally trained and drilled soldiers. These are long-term soldiers who give a good portion of their lives to fighting, to being a part of the military, whether it be in the Navy or whether it be in mobile armies. They have had extensive training on how to fight, how to make formations. And Prussians were probably the best at this particular kind of drilled professional fighting. We sort of think of this as kind of old, archaic, ever since the idea of guerrilla warfare. But at the time, being able to put infantry, people, fighters, and with their muskets in a row, and then a row and a row and a row and a row and a row, and these big squares, these cubes, so to speak. And they all are marching as one. And then when it comes time to fight, the entire front row drops a knee, aims, fires, shoots, and you're getting that entire row of bullets being, or shot being drilled at your front line if you're the opposing enemy. And then those guys move back and the next row comes forward, drops the knee and fires, while the guys who drop back drop all the way to the back and they start reloading their muskets. They are then given time to move up in line until it's their turn to drop the knee on the front line and shoot again. So can you imagine if you got a line of 25, 30 infantry and you get 30 shots into your front line, and then right after that you get another 30, and then another 30, and then another 30. In a matter of minutes, your entire platoon, or whatever you want to call it, is just completely filled with holes. There's nobody there. It is just an amazing tactic. This was well practiced. They practiced this again and again and again, and that changed how people fought. And again, like I said, Prussians by the 1700s were the masters at infantry during this time. It doesn't mean that we gave up horses and things like that. Those were still there. But you take a whole line of horses and they're galloping forward and doing their charge, so to speak. If they had this kind of control and professionalism and mythology, a whole line of these trained soldiers could wipe out a whole bunch of horses. A bullet will hit a horse just as well as it'll hit a man. So unless the ones with the horses charging, the cavalry charging, had artillery that could lob cannons into the middle of all of these lined up soldiers, they had a very little chance of actually making any progress. These lines, these infantry lines, were just incredibly solid for fighting. So, change in how we fight, trained professional soldiers that are drilled again and again on how to use these guns and the things that they were given in charge of. Now, kind of the last thing. The idea of being able to move armies from England, let's say, from England to the New World, from Spain down into Mexico, or the western coast of what is now Peru. To be able to do that took a new skill. You're moving hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands upon thousands of bodies that need clothes, that need boots, that need ammunition, that need gunpowder, that need food, that need beds and things like that, ability to sleep, medicines, first aid. How are you going to coordinate all that? It's one thing to step out your front yard and shoot somebody who's trying to cross your property line. That's one thing. But to be able to take thousands of men and ammunition and equipment and haul it, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 miles across the ocean and land it and then be able to fight and then coordinate food and meals and first aid, things like that, that took a whole new skill set. And that's the difference between, that's what is called staff work. These are not necessarily the people who are fighting on the front line. They're not the infantrymen. They're not the cavalry. These folks are the ones supplying the lines, supplying these men, making sure that they don't come up fighting and then run out of ammunition. And the logistics of it all. How do you move people and all those supplies? It would not be a good idea to move all the food right up to where all the guys are, the infantry is fighting on the front line. You're liable to lose all your food. So how do you do this? Well, that took professional supply and camp movers. They had to know how to do that, how to logistically move things about, count, stores keepers. This was again, another new trade, another new labor skill. And so that was part of how it all came about. So we have these sort of traits coming in. These are all starting to develop, whether it be through the science academies, whether it be through shared information, whatever it was. Now what we have is we have rise of great powers. Not only great powers, but there are some who rise to even greater power. And we're going to look at that at our last segment, our last video, number 3, for this week, week 4, the military revolution. So take a break, go get a glass of water, go get a snack, and come right back.